We started this series 4 weeks ago. I really didn't know how it would go over. I haven't done this in years and years and years. And it all is rooted in something I heard probably about 20 years ago from a philosopher and a Christian theologian named Francis Schaeffer. And he said, if you want to know what's going on in the hearts and minds of our culture, listen to our music, watch TV, and watch our movies, because they're reflecting what's inside human nature right now. So if you want to know what's going on in our society, look at our arts. And I thought that was such a profound idea. And so years ago, I stumbled on this idea. Why don't we do a series, and we can talk about popular movies, and we can pull some of the key lessons out of those and talk about how they do line up or don't line up with the Bible. And so I really enjoyed this series. So we're going to continue with one of my all-time favorite movies, all time, and it's this one, Meet the Robinsons. So, don't know if you've ever seen it. Some of you are like, you're not cartoon people. Well, I am absolutely a cartoon people. So, I love, and the moment I watched this one, I knew that this would be something I would someday talk about. And by the way, the pictures today, it was really hard to find good pictures, so some of these are really pixelated, but I wanted to at least give you an idea of it. It's the story of this little boy named Lewis. So Lewis is an orphan. When he was a little baby, his mom leaves him on the stairs of an orphanage in a big city, and she goes away, and nobody knows even who she is. And so he grows up as an orphan in this orphanage, and he is constantly has families coming in to see if maybe they want to adopt him, and he's rejected 124 times. And primarily it's because he's not like normal kids. I mean, he's an inventor and a science geek and a math geek, and he loves all of those kind of things. So he doesn't love sports at all, unless inventing is a sport, he says. Then he really loves that sport. So he doesn't, and many times his inventions, when he's showing it to potential parents, well, it doesn't go very good. And so like this peanut butter and jelly machine blows up all over them. And so it's just constant rejection. And so he finally gets so discouraged that he thinks that the only person who's ever loved him was his mom, who left him on the steps of the orphanage. And so he decides he's going to try and find a way to find his mom. The problem is nobody knows who she is, because she left him in the middle of the night with no note. This, way before DNA, there's testing, so no way to find out who she is. But he realizes that as a baby, he saw her face. So he knows trapped in his brain somewhere is his mom's face. So as this young kid, he comes up with this idea that he's going to invent a machine that's going to allow him, it's a memory scanner that's going to allow him to go into his brain, find the picture of his mom, get the picture of his mom, and then track her down so that she can adopt him and he can be a part of the family. And then what happens after that is awesome. Like I said, one of my favorite movies. And over again, if you watch the movie at all, if you've ever seen it, you know that the real theme of the movie is really how you process and handle your failures. Because over and over again, as he tries these things, they just keep failing and failing and failing and failing and failing. You all know that everything worthwhile in life that you want to get and pursue is going to require that you learn how to handle failure, right? All of you know that. You will never, ever be, I don't know any overnight successes. I don't know anybody who tries something the first time, does it perfectly, and never fails. I don't know anybody. All the people that you look at in your life who are very successful, they have at some point had to overcome failure. What really struck me, though, is interesting is, did you ever stop to think about the fact that when God made us as human beings, he made us to fail? Now, that sounds weird, right? But God made you to fail, and to fail a lot. Think about this. First time that little guy stood up, did he stay standing perfectly? Oh no, he fell. And he fell and fell and fell and fell before he finally stood, right? First steps that little guy took, right? And by the way, this could be you, right? If we had pictures of you, first steps. Did he walk perfectly? Nope. You all know that. Fell and fell and fell and fell and failed and failed and failed. They failed to stand up. They failed to walk. And by the way, the first time you let them try and feed themselves, that's not where cake goes, right? That shouldn't go up your nose. But that's what we all look like. You all look like that. You fell when you tried to stand. You fell when you tried to crawl, when you tried to walk, when you tried to feed yourself. You failed hundreds and hundreds of times in your life. Isn't it interesting that God made us as human beings who fail? And maybe what he's trying to show to us is you have to learn how to be resilient, because everything that just the fact that you walked in here today, that was a triumph of success over failure. Because you know how to walk now. And if you've had any of the treats that are here today, sorry for those of you watching online, none of you have it all over your face. You've triumphed in your eating now. Right? You're a triumph of success. But failure can be hard, right? We all know that. If I were to ask you to think about the most painful failure you've ever had in your life, that can be difficult. It's easy to stand here and laugh about it. Yeah, we're wired by God to fail, and you need to overcome failures. But when you fail and fail hard, especially if the failure is public, boy, you can really be gun shy. And you can start to pull back and stop risking failure. I read this quote this last week. It said, the fear of failure makes you small. I'm not sure it makes you small, but I know what it does is it makes your world small. As you start pulling back more and more, taking less and less risks because you don't want to fail. It makes your world small, and I don't think God has that for any of us. The truth is, the followers of Jesus in the New Testament, they had to risk failure a lot to follow Jesus. So this is an important subject. So we're continuing our series today called Peniel Goes to the Movies. We're going to talk about how to fail successfully, using that movie as our guide. I want to ask you to open your program. Inside, you'll find these notes. Would you grab your notes and a pen as we jump into this? Of course, for those of you watching online, welcome. Glad you decided to watch us today. If you go to our website at penielchurchlife.com, you can download these notes for free as well. So let's jump into this. Number one, you have to understand that failure is the key to success. Failure is the key to success. By the way, some of you are looking at the fact that I have 4 points on my notes with all of these things, and you're thinking, oh, how much is he skipping? Well, I'm actually going to get all the things filled in today. I'm not failing. You're going to get to write everything down. Okay, so understand that failure is really the key to success, and that's what you see in the movie. If you watch the movie at all, he's trying to build this memory scanner, and over and over and over, with every iteration, he has attempts and failures. And he fails, and he fails, and he fails, and he fails, and he fails. And he fails his way eventually, though, to the point where he is successful. That's how success happens. Let me give you another example. Do any of you own a Dyson vacuum cleaner? Any of you ever owned a Dyson? Okay, right? So some of you know about Dyson. This is James Dyson, the inventor of the Dyson vacuum cleaner. So he had this idea for a different kind of vacuum, a bagless vacuum cleaner. And so he started investing his own money and making prototypes. Do you know how many prototypes James Dyson made before he actually succeeded? 5,126. It took 15 years and every dollar he owned. How many of you would have quit after 374 failures, right? Or 963 failures, or 4,362 failures, right? What number would you have quit? Now, thank goodness for James Dyson, he didn't quit at number 5,125 because his company has earned him now $4.5 billion. You fail your way to success. Do you get that? You fail your way to success. It's not an overnight success. People look at him like, oh, I wish you could be James Dyson. Do you wish that you'd failed 5,125 times? Well, I don't want the failure. I just want the money and the success. No, it doesn't happen that way. There's so many things that you learn from failure you don't learn any other way. I love this quote from Thomas Edison. He said, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. Boy, I hope that isn't true of me, of us. There are things that you gain from failure that we absolutely need. You gain experience, what works and doesn't work. You gain knowledge and insight if you handle it right, which we'll talk about. Persistence and resilience, innovation, because what you tried didn't work, so you got to innovate. You got to try something different. You grow. Matter of fact, one of the interesting things I read was, do you all know the rock star Lady Gaga? You ever heard that name? So super popular rock star. When she was just breaking into the industry, I read this last week, that she actually got a contract and they fired her. They withdrew the contract 3 months in because they said she's never going to amount to anything. But the interesting thing is, you know what she did with her failure? She chose at that moment to reinvent herself. Now maybe the world never hears of Lady Gaga if not for that failure. Because the failure made her rethink what she was doing and change how she wanted to present herself and her music to the world. Who knows? All I know is that success and failure are completely connected, and you fail your way to success. So interesting. And if you listen to me all, you know I love the field of neuroscience. I love what they discover when they look into our brains and watch us do things like fail. Do you know what they discover? Is that all of us only get better if we're failing to a little bit of a degree. It triggers the active centers of your brain. It brings the best out of you. Now, there's a risk here, right? If you're failing to the point where you're overwhelmed by your failures, then we throw up our hands, we don't do anything. But the other thing that is just as dangerous is when we're not failing at all. Let me ask you, are you in a place today where you're really not failing at all? You're not failing at anything. God wired your brain to bring out the best when you're failing a little bit. What do you think he wants you to do? I mean, he did this with his disciples. You know the stories? Jesus is walking on the water, and Peter says, let me come to you. And he says, come on out. And what happens? Does Peter walk successfully on the water? Well, for a little bit, and fails, right? And there's a teachable moment. You have to be failing to really experience God. That's what I believe. But failure doesn't automatically result in success. Okay? Some of you are like, well, then I should be so successful because I fail all the time. No, it's not automatic. It's not an automatic thing. Matter of fact, in one research project, they said there's one key indicator that determines how somebody who fails either goes on to success or goes on to more failure. And they said there is one thing that they look for, and it's this: do they own the failure? So here's on your notes. I want you to write that down. It really is. You have to get to the point where you're comfortable saying, I admit I failed. Now, some of you, that's easy to admit. Some of you, personality-wise, that is really hard. There's a personality component to this. Some of you know people who have never admitted they failed at anything. In the Bible, look what David did in Psalm 38. He said, I'm on the edge of losing it. The pain in my gut keeps burning. I am ready to tell my story of failure. And that's often where the success begins to happen, is once we're willing to admit, I made a bad business decision. I missed that deadline. I was totally unprepared for that interview. I forgot a key detail in that report. I forgot an ingredient in the recipe. Ever done that one? I forgot the timer. I didn't prepare enough. Whatever it is, they know that people who are most successful in life are the ones who are able to say, I admit it, I failed. Because if you can't admit that, then failure is never going to bring anything good in your life. So, I want you to think about this. Where have you failed recently, or where are you failing currently? You have to think about that. Then second, and I'm just going to touch on this one, but you're going to get all the lines, so don't personalize your failures. Don't personalize your failures. And this is really hard because we live in a world where if you fail in public, is the public kind? Some of you had families where if you failed, they weren't kind. So failure has a really painful association for you. In the movie, there's a contrast between Lewis, who fails and keeps going, and his roommate. His roommate, the kid in the baseball cap, is Michael Yagubian, and everybody just calls him Goob. So Goob is an orphan as well, living with Lewis, and Lewis keeps him up day and night working on that machine. So poor Goob never gets any sleep, And he's exhausted, and he loves baseball. It's what he wants to do with his life. But on the big day of the big game, he's so exhausted that he's standing in the field, and he falls asleep. And the ball is hit to him, and it hits him in the head and wakes him up. He doesn't know even what's happened. And his team loses because of him. And so he fails. And this is the contrast in the movie. And because of that failure, the kids beat him up, and he never moves on. The little line at the bottom says, for some reason, people didn't want to adopt me. He never moves on from that failure. He never takes any step forward after that failure. No more risks. He won't say yes to other kids inviting him over to do things. He just stays in that failure and stays in that failure, and it ruins his whole life. Matter of fact, toward the end of the time, Lewis says to him, you just focused on the bad stuff when all you had to do was let go of the past and keep moving forward. And he couldn't. And it's sad when I read that. I mean, don't you know people who are stuck in their past? It's like they threw an anchor out at that point of failure. And they're trying to move forward anchored to this past failure. For some of you, it's not that you know someone. For some of you, you know that that's you. You live with this shame message that constantly is inside of you because of a failed whatever. I've talked about this before. It's really important that you understand the difference in this sentence. I want you to write this down. The first part's important to say, essential to say. You can't be successful unless you can say that first part, but the second part is really tricky. It's okay to say I have failed, but it's not okay to say I am a failure. Just because you failed doesn't make you a failure. You know what it makes you? It makes you a human. God wired failure into following him. God knows that I'm going to fail him, and you're all going to fail him. So you know what he did? He created a system where when we fail him, we can come to him and say, God, I admit that it was wrong. Please forgive me. And then he just pours mercy on us. So I admit, I failed. I am failing. But that doesn't mean I am a failure. If you put the second message on you, then what it does is it's like putting a limiter on your life, and you can never live up to what God has for you. So really think about whether or not you label yourself as a failure. Okay, that's all I have time on that one because I really want to jump into this one. Number 3, you have to be, if you want to be successful, you got to process your failures. And this is so important. Process your failures. So Lewis does this all the time in the movie. He invents something, it doesn't work. He goes back to, you ever heard the phrase, back to the drawing board? Literally what he does. Back to the drawing board, back to the drawing board, back to the drawing board. He processes, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? And so he makes changes and adjustments, and he keeps trying and trying and trying till he gets it. And that's how life works. But again, I've already said this. Failure doesn't automatically lead to success, right? All of you know that. How many of you have someone in your life that you know or have known who failed in a dating relationship because they dated the wrong person? They dated somebody they should never have been with. And what happens? They get out of that relationship. What type of person do they choose next? Same one, right? And then they get hurt. And they get out of that relationship, and what do they choose next? Failure doesn't automatically lead to success if you don't ever stop and process why you keep failing. You have to stop. Matter of fact, the Bible is really pretty direct about this. Look at this. It says, like a dog that returns to its vomit, a fool does the same foolish things again and again, and the idea is that they never give thought to their ways. It's like, why do I keep choosing this? Why do I keep choosing people who take me for granted and treat me like garbage? Why? They never ask the question. So because they never do, they never figure out the answer to the why, and they never move on. They just keep going back again and again and again and failing again and again. So I'm a huge believer in this. And if you flip your notes over on the back, I put down some of the questions that I ask myself when I fail, because I fail. On my laptop and on my personal one and my work one, I have a folder that's my failure folder. Because I fail. I fail at work. I fail at home. I fail personally. I fail spiritually. And when I fail, I want to process it so I can learn from it, because I don't know about you. I don't like pain. Don't like pain. And the only way for me to reduce the amount of pain is to learn from my failures so I don't create them again. These are the questions, though, that I love. I go over these again and again. Why did I fail? What did I miss? How do I prevent this from happening? What do I learn from this? So I just did this just just a short time ago. I was asked to be part of this project, and my role kept growing bigger and bigger. And so I'm like, okay, this is cool. I've had some experience with this, and I thought this will be fun. But I'd never done it before, and there were parts of it I had never done. But I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm not afraid of risk. I'll try this. Yeah, maybe I should have been a little more afraid of risk, because my efforts, I know I'm being a little cryptic. Yes, I am. So it did not go near as good as I knew it could go. Matter of fact, if I was evaluating myself, I would have given myself a grade of a C or a C minus. The people around me didn't grade me that harshly, but I knew what it was capable of being, and I knew what it turned out to be. So for the next week, I did this. I literally have a document that's about a page and a half long where I walk through everything. What did I do? What did I do right? Because I don't always want to just focus on the negative. What went well? And then it's like, what didn't go well? It was like, oh, that was a long list. It was a long list of things I did that did not go well. And then the key questions, what do I learn from that? What did I miss? How do I prevent it from ever happening again? And that page and a half is going to save me so much pain the next time I'm asked to do a project like that again, because I will be. And so the next time, if I can take my mistakes from 25 down to 11, that's huge progress, right? And then down even less. So my question to you is this: what did you learn from your last failure? Now again, if you can't think of anything you're failing in, and you haven't failed for a while, you have a bigger question to ask. And that's, Jesus, is there something more you have for me? Because maybe he's trying to prompt you out of your comfort zone. All right, last one. If you want to fail successfully, you keep moving forward. So let me walk you through this again. So all of us are failures, right? We all fail. Every single one of us, we have failed, we are failing, and I want me to predict your future. I can predict all of your future. Ready? In the future, you are going to fail. It's a guarantee. You know, the command in the Bible is to love everyone deeply from your heart. Love does no harm to its neighbor. God says, now go live that out. And everyone's your neighbor. Yeah. You think you're not going to fail to follow God? I am. We all are. So we admit our failures. We don't personalize them. We process and learn from them, but the key thing is we keep moving forward. If you see the movie ever, this is the second half of the movie's theme, over and over again. Keep moving forward, keep moving forward, keep moving forward. Matter of fact, one of my absolute favorite movie scenes of all time is in this movie. So this next picture is terrible. I couldn't get a good picture of it. So this is where Lewis is trying to fix that peanut butter and jelly machine for this family, and instead of fixing it, he makes it so that it explodes, and peanut butter and jelly go all over everyone in the room. They are just covered with it, and he feels terrible. He wants to cry, and he puts his head down, and all of a sudden, everyone around him goes, "You failed!" Yes! They start cheering for him. Then they're like, "It's awesome, outstanding," and he's just completely dumbfounded by their reaction. It's like, why are you cheering me for my failure? And in one of the best movie lines of all time, the woman says, "From failing you learn, from success, not so much." From failure we learn. You know why we don't learn from success? Because what we tend to do is go, yeah, just me. Yeah, I don't need to look at anything because I'm just awesome. I am just that man. And so we don't do any kind of reflection or deep thought. We don't innovate because after all, we did it. So we miss out on any kind of key learning that God may have from us. But from failure, you can actually learn. Matter of fact, do you ever watch Olympics? Anyone ever like the Olympics? Ever watch Olympic diving? So if you've ever watched Olympic diving, you know for a long time now, there is one team that has dominated men's Olympic diving, and it's the Chinese team. They dominate it. So many times the scores aren't even close. What I read prepping this message is that when one of their Chinese divers is about to try a new trick that's never been done in competition, you know, you can imagine how many times that goes perfect the first time, right? So many times they try the trick, they land on their side, they belly flop, back flop, I mean, whatever they do, they just miss it. You know what that sound they hear when they get out of the water? Applause. Their team cheers for them because they failed. Isn't that interesting? It's just like what the movie was portraying. What if that's why the best divers in the world dive on that team? Because they don't have to fear failure. They know that failure is going to be applauded. Now again, some of you aren't from homes where failure was applauded, right? So it's a little harder, but it's essential that we understand that failure and success are connected. And we keep moving forward. Jesus actually built, the model of Jesus on this is so specific. One time, Jesus grabbed his disciples and he paired them off by twos. You two go together, you two go together. And he said, don't take any money, don't take a bag, don't take anything, not an extra set of clothes, nothing. He said, go into all these communities around you, walk in and start talking about the kingdom of God. And I'm scaling it down a little bit. And he said, you're going to have two responses. You're going to go into some of these towns and they're going to welcome you. He said, stay there. And find this person that will take you in and stay there. But then he said, in some towns you're going to go into, and they are not going to like you there. And he said, I want you to sit in a corner and cry and never do it again. No, he said, all I want you to do is they don't welcome you, shake the dust off your feet, when you leave their town as a testimony against them, and keep moving forward. On to the next town, on to the next town. Don't stop. He literally taught them how to deal with failure. And again, it's a spiritual thing. I remember the first time I tried to talk, I was in high school and I became a follower of Jesus. I remember the first time I tried to talk to my buddy about Jesus, because I was so excited about him. I had no words. Nobody had taught me anything. And I'm like, and I totally blew it. And sometimes when you're doing things spiritually like that, you can get really nervous. It's like, maybe I shouldn't talk about this again. And Jesus would say, just keep moving forward. Just move forward. Try again. Try the next one. Don't stop. So in my mind, I lock two things that really keep me going when I've failed. The first is this. I remember that God can bring good from anything. And if you want to, you can personalize it as you're writing it down. You can say, God can bring good from my failures. If you want to personalize it in this context, write it that way. God can bring good from my failures, even the failures that I caused by my own poor choices. That's what's so... Wait, just sit and listen to that for a second. God can bring good even from my personal failures that I bring because of my poor choices. That's why he's worth worship and praise and honor. And I didn't like the word can, so I actually, as I was rehearsing, I'm like, I don't like that. So scribble out the word can, and I want you to see what the promise in the Bible really is. God will bring good. That's what he says. It's not that he can, it's that he will. He'll bring good out of everything we go through. That's why I worship God. It's because I can't bring good out of everything we go through, but he can. So if you're stuck today and you have no failures in your life, here's what I want you to pray. God, what's my next step? That's my challenge. Last week I challenged you and I said, would you pray and say, God, interrupt me? I don't know if any of you have been praying that this week. I prayed it a lot. God has interrupted me a lot. You can go listen to last week's message if you want to know more about that. But this is what I want you to pray. What's my next step? Because he's promised that he can work in our failures. In one of the most amazing examples of this, there was a man named Ted Giesel. In the 1930s, Ted Giesel and his wife were on a slow boat across the ocean. So it took forever. And Ted Giesel was being driven crazy by the monotony and the boredom and the rhythmic sound of the engines in that old steel can they were just sailing across the Atlantic on. So his wife got to the point, she's like, fine, just why don't you go write a story to the rhythm of the engine? She was at her wit's end. She's like, I don't know what to do with you. So why don't you go write a story? So Ted sat down and he started writing, and just think about it. Can you picture one of those big old steam engines with all the noise and the banging of the engine? So he kept hearing it, and so he starts writing a story, kind of like a rhyming story, and then turns into like a kid's story. He's like, well, this is kind of interesting. And so he finishes the voyage, and he's got a story that he really kind of likes. And his wife says, why don't you try and go get it published? So he goes to one publisher, and they reject him. He goes to another publisher. He goes to 27 publishers. They all reject him. Matter of fact, this is cool, he's literally on his way home to burn his manuscript when he just happens to bump into an old college roommate, a friend from college, who just happens to have just gotten hired at a publishing house. And he starts telling me, I've been rejected 27 times. And well, let me see he had it with him. He was about to burn it. And he hands it to him, and 30 minutes later, he has a signed deal. And that's how close the world came to never knowing the name Dr. Seuss. Because Ted Giesel is Dr. Seuss. He literally was going to quit and burn his manuscript and oh, what an accident that he happened to bump into a friend who just happened to be working at a publishing house, who just happened to want to offer him a contract. This is what I want you to know. When you begin to follow Jesus, so you go back to that question and you say, God, what's my next step? You know what's going to start happening is accidents, coincidences. Because there's nothing that God can't bring good out of. Even the failures that we bring into our own life that are so painful for us to deal with. So let me ask you to think about what your next step may be. For some of you, it's time to try for that promotion. You've wanted it, that next position, and you have just been scared to get the rejection. So you're sitting and not moving forward, and it's time. Some, it's time to get into the field you want to be in. Because you don't like the career that you have and you want to be in something different. It's time to try for it. For some of you, it's time to go back to school. It's like, yeah, but I may not be able to hack it. Yeah, I totally get that. I went back to school at the age of 46, and I was terrified. I put the pause button on that stupid decision for so long because I was so afraid of college math. I thought, I'm going to fail college math. Yeah, I didn't fail it. But we're so afraid of failure. Some of you, it's time to hit play instead of pause on that one. Or some of you have a dream that you've never chased. Some of you have an art dream, a writing dream. Some other dream, you want to start your own business, and you're doing nothing. You're not moving forward at all. It's time to move forward. For some, it's time to take a risk and start dating again. It's time to deal with the pain from your past. Or how many people do you know who have just given in to an addiction? Who've just given in to alcoholism, and they're just like, well, it's just who I'm going to be, and I'm never going to be better. Because they tried and failed and tried and failed, and it's time to try again. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but I'm telling you right now, the world is absolutely full of successful failures. The world is full of successful failures. So what's your next step? And if you don't have one, and if you're not failing, then would you just pray, God, what's the next step you have for my life? Just pray that prayer. Some of you, the truth is, I know people who would be afraid to even pray that because they're afraid of what he may ask of them. You can trust him. You don't need to be afraid. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish. I mean, all of this is just possible because of the relationship that God offers all of us, that we can be his sons and daughters. We can be a part of his family. And that is all made possible because of the work he did. He sent his son to die for us so that all the unloving things we've said and done can be forgiven. We can be made right with God, put in his family, offered this new kind of relationship with him. And if you want that, with your head bowed and your eyes closed, just ask for it. You can say something like this in your heart to him. You can say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I want to be a part of your family. I pray that you would forgive me. I'm asking you to come and make your home inside my heart today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up, would you all grab your little connection card out? Again, regular tenders, I know I ask you to do it every week. Just put your name down. Let us know you're here. But if you prayed and asked for his gift of forgiveness or renewed your commitment, or you have a prayer request, some of you, this tapped something inside of you. You know you're avoiding a decision you need to make. There's a risk you need to take. You want us to pray for you? We will. Just put this down, or write it down here, and then just drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back walls. And don't forget, did someone come to mind when I was talking about the food in the freezer? Is there someone you know that's really hurting today, or in pain today, or feeling lonely today, or feeling sad today, or scared today? Don't miss that opportunity. Some of you, this is the risk. God is saying, take a meal. Please take a meal. There's so many in there. Take a meal and let's go serve people today in his name. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you again next week.